Are you ready? Are you ready? Dustin's not there I was waiting for a response from him, but he'll know what I'm talking about later. So.
He was not ready.
Apparently not. A couple months ago, I was able to do the lesson on a Sunday evening. So all you people that were there, I warned you that you'd be hearing this lesson again. So I apologize for that. But it's just something that, I don't know, it's just something that kind of I had going in my mind and wanted to share. So, and by the way, it's all John Keita's fault. It actually came out of a conversation John and I had, so he'll understand a little bit later into the lesson what I'm talking about. So, Proverbs 22:6, memory verse for many. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from it. Okay, I wanted to start out with that verse, but a lot of times we use that, obviously training up a child, when we're talking about rearing children. And that's not exactly where I'd like to, kind of focus on that, but the training. Okay, that's something a lot of us are familiar with. And as I was looking through some of the verses as I was preparing this lesson, I kind of came up, some other things that, can all, be along the same lines. Training, exercising, preparation, those kinds of words. Okay, those are things that I wanted to, to look in and focus on. If you would, let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Verse 24. Do you not know that they which run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, and so fight I, not as one that beats the air, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be cast away. Okay, so we can see here, that training, that preparation, that exercising has a purpose. Okay, we're not doing those things, just for fun. I don't know too many people who just like to run just for the sake of running. Okay, now I bring up running because I, for a long time, was a runner. Now, we could use any number of physical examples for these types of things. I'm going to use, some sports. That's something I'm very familiar with. I still enjoy. But there was always a purpose to these exercises, a purpose to prepare. Steve's brought up a lot of times, you think about an Olympic athlete. They don't just wake up one morning, the Olympics are next week. I'm going to go and run in the 100 meters. That doesn't happen, does it? Okay, many of these people are, raised, you look at some of the gymnasts, some of those young girls that were raised from, 6, 7, 8 years old, and trained from that age. So many of them, spend their lifetimes training for these things. But always there's a purpose behind it. Okay. Something I'd really like to, I guess that brought a lot of these things to my mind in the last 6 months. I had a few very painful reminders of a lack of training. Some of you during the revival here might have noticed I was out here with some of the kids and Jeremiah Dillon playing basketball. Now, some of you might have seen me shooting around, once in a while over the last few years, but really that's the first time I've actually played a game of basketball with competition in probably 8 or 10 years. My surgeon would probably not be happy with me if he saw me out there jumping around playing with those kids, okay? So, for a couple days afterwards, I felt the effects of not having any training and doing something, that I was not used to doing. Probably a month after that, I had a really big limb. I got some big maple trees in my yard. And, there's a limb, probably about yay big around. Fell off the tree, back in the spring. Landed on my shed and obliterated it. So, I finally got around to cutting this thing up and getting it off the shed and cleaning everything up. Well, I decided to buy a splitting maul and, just cut up the wood and keep it for firewood. I've not split wood with a splitting maul since I was 12 years old. Okay, so I get out there and spend an entire day cutting wood, and then I, split as much as I could in, a day's period. My back hurt for probably 4 or 5 days afterwards. Okay, again, doing something that my body's not used to. If you're going to do those kinds of things, you have to be doing them on a regular basis. Now, I have a fairly physical job. I do things. I'm out and about and fairly active. But that was something that my body was really not used to. Again, back to the cross-country example. We ran cross-country. I remember, both my junior and senior years, our coach would give us a running program to do over the summer while we were at home. Okay? I always had all these lofty goals. I'm going to get really into this running program and do all the work that he said to do over the summer. Well, guess what? I never did any of it. Okay? So we'd show up, and I went to a boarding school out in Wisconsin. So, once I got dropped off at school, we were there. So cross-country camp starts first day of school. All my friends, some of these guys put in 200-300 miles over the summer. Okay, they really had a good base built up. They were, they hit practice and they were ready to go. Well, guess where I was? Okay, no. It took me the entire season to kind of get up to where they had already been over the summer. Okay, now I think, there were some guys there that were just better runners than I was. There were some really talented runners on our team. There were some, I was probably in the top 5 or 10 on our team at any given time. But what would happen is I'd always kind of start out, kind of at the back of the pack the first few races. And as the season goes on for 3 months, I could feel myself getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So by the end of the season, these guys are hitting their peak right in the middle of the season and running great times. Well, I would never, it seemed like, the last 2 or 3 races of the year, every year, my time would just drop. Boom, because I'd finally hit where they had been a month ago. Just an example of the training and the things, they put in the work beforehand, and it really paid off. Obviously, like I said, I eventually caught up, but if I had done the work before, what might have happened, towards the end of the season? Again, we can see all kinds of examples in life. In physical examples, we train for work. Okay, everybody that has a job, you might have a particular job that you have been trained for. In school, we study for a test. Okay, we know the test is coming, so we need to learn the information to get ready for the test. So all these things are examples. We've got a lot of guys that were in the military. I'm sure they can really tell you about training and exercising. Some of the guys that are in the emergency services as well. Okay, you go through training so that when you get to the situation, when you get to the actual where your skills will be needed, you're ready. So, is that what we're talking about here? I've given you all these physical examples. But let's, look in that verse again in 1 Corinthians, in chapter 9, verse 25. Every man that strives for mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. In 2 Corinthians 4, it talks about those things that are not seen. Okay? See, we're here to do this, not, I loved running. I was on a great team. We won a lot of races, won a lot of trophies. But those aren't the things, that's not the crown that we're here to win. Let's turn to 1 Timothy chapter 4. Verse 7, 1 Timothy 4 and 7. But refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise rather unto godliness. For bodily exercise profits little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come. Okay, bodily exercise profits little. Okay, does he say it doesn't profit at all? No. But is that where our focus needs to be? Obviously not. Now, I will make an argument. If your body is healthy, how is that going to help your mind? Okay. Obviously, the better shape or, the healthier your body is, the better your mind's going to function, which is what we really need to be focusing in on here. Also during the revival, I think that closing lesson that Matt Harper did, I don't know, if you haven't heard it, find it and listen to it. Great lesson. But he opened that up with, talking about how, people in the world, and he included people in the church as well, how mentally weak people really are. Okay, and obviously the point of his lesson was really to challenge us, and to say that cannot be anymore. Okay, we have to be mentally strong. As he was going along in his lesson, part of it was talking about Romans, and the letter to the Romans, and how Paul was preparing those people. He knew those people were going to be put to death. Okay, a lot of the people that he was writing to would be martyred. Okay, so if you look at what Paul was doing, he was preparing them knowing that they were going to die. Now let's turn to Hebrews chapter 5. I was looking in verse 13. Yeah, let's go back to 12. See, I always do this. I just write down a chapter and never write the verses down. So, in verse 12, for when for the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become as have need of milk and not of strong meat. For everyone that uses milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongs to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. Let's read that last part again. Even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. Okay, see, that takes some time for us, doesn't it? To learn to stop focusing on the flesh, I brought up these physical examples, and start looking at the things that are spiritual, those things that are not seen. Again, that 2 Corinthians 4 talks about the things not seen, and those are the things that are eternal, the things that will last. I know a lot of guys have used the example. How many people have actually watched The Matrix? Is there maybe half of you? So for those of you who have not watched it, just quick. Basically, all of humanity is basically just an illusion. And these people are, everything that they go through is basically just a dream that, the machines have taken over and people are hooked up to the matrix. Okay, well, there's a few people who have rebelled, and they basically have gotten free from the matrix, some of which I haven't watched enough of it to know how or why. But they go around freeing certain people who they, think can help their cause. Well, the main character, Neo, they unhook him from the matrix, and then they bring him, back to their ship. And as he's sitting there, they're trying to explain to him, so everything he knows, the world that he knows has been a dream. He has never, he's been hooked up to the matrix and has never actually physically done any of the things that he, knows is his life. So as he's waking, they have to rebuild his body because his muscles have never been used. So he wakes up and is conscious now, and he's talking to them, and they keep telling him, the answers are going to come, you'll figure it out. And the first question he asks, he opens his eyes, and why do my eyes hurt? Why do my eyes hurt? And they're all kind of solemn and sad. It's like, you've never used them before. They've never been used. Your eyes have been closed for your, what you know as your life. And I think all of us can kind of relate to that a little bit. When we start to see the truth of the Scriptures and the things that are there, there's some growing pains. There's some things that, it hurts to see those things and to know. I can think of a lot of things in my life to realize that was a lie. When I look at the Scriptures and to realize some of the things that I grew up knowing and believing in are a lie. We can see there's going to be some pains in dealing with that. Also in 1 Corinthians 2, just more, kind of expounding on that a little bit. 1 Corinthians 2 and 14. The natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual judges all things, yet he himself is judged of no man. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. That really kind of encourages me to know, it tells us, that natural man, and I think there's another, I think it's 1 Corinthians 14, 15, where it talks about the natural, or is that 2 Corinthians? Okay. But talking about how the natural comes first, that physical comes first, and that's how we learn. Why did Jesus speak in parables? Because a lot of the things he was trying to get through to them, they wouldn't be able to understand without those physical examples. And so that's where we have to start. But through the training, the renewing of our minds, here, for who has known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him. But we have the mind of Christ. That doesn't come instantly, does it? It has to be learned. Has to be trained, prepared, exercised, disciplined, use whatever words you want to use. It's all the same thing. Let's go back to 1 Timothy 4 for just a minute. Let's pick up in verse 13. Till I come, this is after he's already told him, that bodily exercise profits little, but godliness is profitable. Till I come, do these things. Give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Do not neglect the gift that is in you, which was given you by prophecy with the laying on of hands. Meditate on these things. Give yourself wholly to them, that your profiting may appear to all. Take heed unto yourself and unto the doctrine. Continue in them, For in this you shall save yourself and those that hear you. Okay, he gives a bunch of things there that are pretty, kind of action-type words that, require us to do something. Give attention to exhortation, to doctrine, meditate, give yourself wholly. I went back and was looking in when David was about to die, and he's turning over the building of the temple to Solomon, and it talks about how he gave himself wholly, to the building of that temple. Okay, now obviously he wasn't going to be able to do that, was he? Okay, but if you go back and look at that, let's go back. I think I won't be able to. 1 Chronicles 29. Is that what I want? Yeah, 1 Chronicles 29, verse 2. Now I've prepared with all my might for the house of my God. Verse 3. Moreover, because I have set my affection to the house of my God. Okay, those things were going to be accomplished because he prepared with all his might. Okay, are we preparing with all our might? Now, I asked, at the beginning, are you ready? Well, ready for what? My first thought when I ask myself if I'm ready, I guess the first thing I think of is the attacks that we're promised are going to come. Okay. When you obeyed God's terms of pardon, that put a target on our backs. Okay. Satan will come after us. Okay. We have to know that. Let's turn to 1 Samuel, 1 Samuel 17. We won't read all of this, the account of David and his battle with Goliath. As we think about this story, obviously, the story of David and Goliath is probably pretty familiar to everybody. Even the smallest child. There's some things in here that aren't in the kids' books. Okay, when I think there's so much more if we really look into that, than just a child's story to kind of to develop their faith in God. Let's, where am I looking at? We know the story. David is a young child going out to bring some food to his brothers who are getting ready to battle. Goliath comes out and is, mocking the armies of God, basically challenging anybody that would like to come up and fight him. Let's pick 1 Samuel 17. Verse 31, the words were heard which David spake. They rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant, David, will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said to Saul, your servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and I smote him, and I delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Your servant slew both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Okay, those are some pretty bold words from, probably a pretty young man. Okay, Saul just assumes, by looking on the outside, that he has no experiences in these matters. Okay? Obviously, who would you rather go up, a big man, or would you rather fight with a bear or a lion? I'd be a little bit more scared of the wild animals. Let's continue on here. Obviously he tries on the armor and decides that's, not for him. He knows that he's never used those before. In verse 41, the Philistine came on and drew unto David, and the man that bore his shield went with him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of fair countenance. And the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you come to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. See, that's not in the kids' storybooks, is it? David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. This day will the Lord deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you and take your head from you, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with the sword and the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Again, there's some stuff there that's not in the, that we're not reading to our 3-year-olds, isn't there? All the assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with the sword and the spear. David was prepared, wasn't he? He has this giant and all, these armies, and they all feared this guy, but David knew, he knew his God. He had nothing to fear, did he? I think when we look at it, I kind of always try to put myself in these positions, and man, I don't know. But he knew his God. He had the heart, the desire to please God. He had all the necessary information to know what was going to happen, didn't he? Okay, and again, is looking on those things that are not seen, that he could know that. We all always talk about the New Testament, obviously being more spiritual, or that's how we have to be. But really, what was David looking at there? You can look at some of these greats in the Old Testament, and that's why their faith was so good, because they were looking at the things that can't be seen. 2 Corinthians 10. Verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and everything that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, or are not physical. Now, I guess what I'd like to talk a little bit about now, and this, John, now you know why it's your fault that this lesson came out. John and I are kind of, like-minded in some ways. We both like to watch these hunting shows. Some of these. Lately, I've been watching some that really, and they actually have a lot to do, and I think I've talked about it a little bit before. Just basically talking about, the strength, about health, and about the strength of their mind. Now, these guys are guys that go out in the mountains, camp and hunt for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. They'll take a backpack, go 12 miles up a mountain, with all the food and everything they need in a backpack, kill an animal and pack it 12 miles back to the, a 800-pound elk, and it might take them 4 trips to get it back to where they got to go. Okay, so these guys got to be fit. And they talk a lot about, the strength of their mind as well. So it's kind of interesting, and I think, we can get some really good, some spiritual examples out of these things. Well, John was talking, I don't know how we got on the subject about bear attacks. Okay, so I don't even know, we got to talking about these bear attacks, and I don't even know if I watched the right one that he was telling me to go, go watch this one, it's kind of cool. This guy, he has his own hunting show, so he's fairly famous. Steve Rinella, if you ever care to watch it. They went to an island, I think it's off the coast of Alaska. They're elk hunting. Okay, so somebody in their party, I think there was 4 or 5, 6 guys there, had killed an elk. Okay, they shot this elk up on top of a mountain. It's several miles from where they're camping. So a day and a half later, they hiked back up to the mountain to get to the elk that they had killed. Now, the day they had killed it, they skin it and quarter it, and they hang the meat in trees. Okay, because apparently this island is really famous for how huge their grizzly bears are. Okay, these guys are all experienced hunters. Almost all of them have grown up in grizzly bear country or have a lot of experience in the mountains dealing with grizzlies. So anyway, this party goes back up. They're going to, retrieve this elk, get the meat, and take it back down. And I can't remember exactly. I think they said there was 6 of them altogether. I don't remember. Anyway, they get back up there. They find the meat. They're checking around really closely to see if any bears have been in the area. I've seen other videos where these guys, I watched one in Alaska, a guy killed a moose. Well, he came back the next day to retrieve his moose, and a grizzly bear had buried it. This is a 1,200-pound moose, and there's a mound of dirt, the size of a car. And now, in many places, they warn you, if that happens, you walk away. You do not retrieve that animal, you get out. I think in some places it's even illegal. It's not even, if you've killed this animal, whether you've tagged it or not, if a grizzly bear claims it, you're not allowed to take it. Anyway, they get back up, they search the area, they look around, they found one little pile of bear dung. He said, well, it looked like it had been stepped in and it didn't look real fresh, so he looks around, nothing else was disturbed. The carcass of the animal, the rest of the bones are laying there, the meat's hanging in the tree, nothing had been touched. Well, after a few minutes of looking around, everything looks good. They sit down to eat lunch after this long hike to get there. Okay, so they're sitting down eating sandwiches. And, the video I'm watching is a radio host interviewing him. He knew about this and he wanted to, get him on the show and talk about it. So he says he's sitting there. They're kind of in a circle eating their sandwiches. And he said, first he just kind of noticed the look on everybody's faces. And then he said, the next thing I noticed is, he said, it looked like a landmine went off. Everybody just jumps. And he says, this bear, he had his back to where the bear came from. And he said, this was a big bear. They're all experienced grizzly hunters. He said, this was a big bear. He said, that thing's open mouth came 18 inches from my ear, into this pile of people eating their lunch. Okay, people scatter. He said the last thing he saw was it actually hit one of the guys. As it's going over this little knob, hit the guy. He said, I saw my buddy on this bear's back rolling over and going down the hill on top of the bear. And so he didn't know what happened. Okay. Long story short, nothing else happened. The bear came in for a rush. Everybody exploded like bowling pins. And the bear, they said they could hear it walking later, but nothing else actually happened. One thing he was talking about And he said, you guys have all heard the term plain possum. Okay, now, we know now, after studying the possums, a possum, when, they get attacked or, you go up and mess with them, they'll roll over and play dead. Well, something I didn't know, I guess I had probably heard it, but never, possums don't play dead, okay? They're actually, it stresses them out so much, they just check out. The stress of whatever, they just lay there, their minds just shut down and they lay there. Well, and that's what, Steve, the guy that was telling the story, he said, he told it, he goes, I'm ashamed to say, he goes, I possumed out. He said, when all that happened for the first few seconds, he said, he goes, you talk about these things and you plan for these things, but then when it comes, what happened? He goes, I shut down. A second thing that I thought was really interesting about this whole story, as he's relating the story, the show host is talking about one of his experiences. He says, yeah, he goes, I actually saw a grizzly bear in the woods for the first time this year. And he goes, I've hunted for all these years, and I'll see a black bear. He goes, you'll see a black bear going through, and a black bear will see you and, kind of check you out, wonder what's going on, and, what are you doing? He says, when I saw that grizzly bear, he said, that thing locked on me. And he goes, it was a completely different thing. Okay, it was a completely different animal. And he said, that's all I could think is he's going to eat me. Because that bear, he said, just the look on that bear's face. He said, it was a small one. It wasn't very big, but the difference, was just undeniable. 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking whom he may devour. Our adversary doesn't care. When it says he seeks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, it's the difference between the black bear and that grizzly bear. That grizzly bear was coming to kill, okay? It had food, it was protecting it, it was going to kill, okay? He didn't feel anything, he wasn't scared, and, we have to know, that we are in the same situation with our adversary. Something else he talked about, I touched on it, all the training, all the things they think about, these guys have dealt with bears their whole lives. He said, when that bear came, he said, everything went right out the window. He described, all his buddies are sitting there in that circle. The guy sitting next to him, they all have bear spray. They all have guns. He said, the guy took off his pack. They're sitting on a rock, sets the pack right here. Guns on top of his pack. And he's the one that the bear, came right at. This is the guy that saw the bear. That bear hit that circle with those people. You know what he did? Tried to hit it with his trekking pole. He had hiking sticks and tried to hit the bear with his truck. The gun's right here in his reach. He hit it with the trekking pole. He talked about all his friends. They're always, kind of macho and, discussing which type of gun they want, 357 or a 44. And, he said to his one buddy, I got, 13 reasons why that bear don't want to attack me. He hit him with a trekking pole. Okay. Famous quote, and I'm pretty sure it was Mike Tyson. When he was preparing for one of his fights, he asked him about one of his opponent's strategies. And he says, yeah, he goes, everybody's got a great plan until you get hit in the mouth. Okay. They got a great plan until Mike Tyson punches them in the face. Okay, then your plan goes right out the window. Okay, no matter how prepared they were, They're not prepared enough. The last thing I'd like to share, about that story, he was talking, and he said right on there, he goes, I'm really ashamed at how we reacted. We spend all this time, we go through it in our minds. What's going to, if a bear comes, what are we going to do? And again, it all went right out the window when that happened. But he talked about there was another group of hunters on that same island a couple months later. He goes, basically same situation. They killed an animal. This bear attacks, and he goes, these guys were army. He goes, they killed the bear. He said, that's the difference. He goes, those guys had been in battle, and these guys had seen action. He goes, the one guy got tore up bad, but they killed it. He goes, we just, I possummed out. The other guy hits him with a trekking pole. These guys killed the bear. And just showing the difference of the training. Their training was real. Okay, their training was real, and they were prepared. Let's turn to Ephesians chapter 6. And we'll go ahead and we'll close with this. Ephesians chapter 6, starting verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in that evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with the truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. And above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. I've heard it brought out, several times over the years about this passage. You notice there is no armor for the back. Okay? We have to be ready. Like it or not, believe it or not, we are in a war, okay? And, the sooner we realize it, the sooner we know it, the better prepared we can be. I'd also like to just point out one more thing. And you don't need to turn there, but, going back to David in 1 Samuel, verse 48, it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, what did David do? He hasted and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. Okay, you know the rest of the story. He hasted and ran. David was prepared, mind, his heart, his faith was in the right place, and he had all the correct information and all. Obviously he had the experience in battling with a bear and a lion. He knew whose the battle was. So, are you ready? If not, get ready. Again, we are in a war. The adversary doesn't care. There's no conscientious objectors in this world. Satan doesn't take prisoners. He's coming to kill. Just like that bear was. So, let's stand.